So when we talk about managerial accounting or cost accounting, something that's going to come up pretty frequently is this notion of manufacturing costs. So when we think about manufacturing costs, they're very important because they're actually going to be used in calculating something called cost of goods sold. And so it's important that we have a fundamental understanding of what manufacturing costs are. So when we think about manufacturing costs, I'll just abbreviate here, manufacturing costs can be split into three main items. So we've got direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. And I'm sure you've heard the term overhead before. You might not have an understanding of what it is, and we're going to talk about that in the video right now. So let's use an example. Let's take a firm, and let's say that your firm, let's say that you manufacture automobiles. So you make cars. That's what your firm does. You make cars. Okay, so we're just going to use an example as we walk through direct materials, direct labor, and overhead and kind of tie it back into this idea of making cars so you can understand and it's a little bit less abstract. So let's think about direct materials. Now, if we want to define direct materials, what we're really doing is just saying on a broad level, it's any kind of material that goes into the final product. So when we can think about our example for the cars, so an example is going to be steel, right? Steel is going to go into the car, right? The car is going to be made of steel. We might have something like rubber to make the tires. We have these different things. Maybe you have plastic to make a windshield wiper on the car. You have all these different things. They're direct materials, and they directly go into the final product, which in this case is the car. So they go into the car if it's somehow some type of material that actually is put into the car to build the car, then it's a direct material. Now we've got the second component now, which is direct labor. And when we think about direct labor, it's kind of similar, a little more abstract, but it's labor that can be traced to that car. To individual units of production, which in this case is the car. When we talk about tracing, what we're talking about is we can say, okay, well, look, we can actually tie a specific person, so some laborer, some employee at the firm, we can tie them to this car. So we just had a car come off the assembly line, and we could say that this person helped assemble that car. They put the door on. They did something that we can trace it, and we can say, okay, this labor from this person went into that car, and that's kind of this idea of tracing. Now you might say, well, in what case could you not trace something back to the car? Well, if we think about someone like, for example, a janitor. So a janitor, we can't necessarily tie the work the janitor did sweeping the floor to an individual car. We can't really make that leap. It's not traceable, so that's not going to be direct labor. So direct labor would be more like the person who's doing the assembling. And kind of the idea of the janitor not being able to trace the cost is going to lead us in to basically the idea of manufacturing overhead. And manufacturing overhead is just generically everything that's not direct materials or direct labor is overhead. So I'll just give some kind of specific examples so you'll understand a little bit better. So when we think about the indirect labor, we've got, of course, I just gave the example of the janitor. Indirect materials might be a little bit more difficult to understand. Maybe there's some glue or something that was somehow used to put together something that in turn then was put into the car or something like that. It's some kind of thing that doesn't really it's not really like steel to be used for the car. If we just think about something, like I said, like they're using a glue gun in the factory to put together, let's say, your rear view mirror. So let's say there's glue to put together a component. So I guess in a way you could technically say that maybe the glue is an input to the car, but not really. Really, it's just something that's kind of used somewhere along the line. It's this tiny thing that is kind of indirectly used to build the car, but it's not real. You wouldn't say that car is made of glue. At least I hope you're not driving a vehicle that's shoddy. But when we think about other kind of costs that really can't be traced, we can think about things like utility costs, maybe depreciation expense, maintenance and repair for a machine that was used to assemble the vehicle, things even maybe like property taxes. Right? We can't really trace property taxes directly to a single vehicle that comes off the assembly line. So really, when we think about our three types of manufacturing costs, it's really this idea of tracing or being able to figure out if these things actually go into the car or some way measure and figure that they go into the car is really what is going to be the determining factor of whether something is overhead or whether it's not. So we've got direct materials, just material, the steel to build the car. We've got the labor, the assembly of the car, the person who put the car together, and then really we've got everything else, which is our overhead.